Hello everyone, this is False Mind Reads here, and today I'm bringing you my review of The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. I have to confess something. I was tricked by BookTube, okay, into not reading this book. And yet I read it anyways. Now, how did that happen? Basically, when I hear a book recommendation, sometimes it doesn't capture my attention. Other times it does. I'm sure it's happened to you too. But sometimes a book catches my attention for the wrong reasons. And a book series, this one, happened to do that. Everyone said it's good characters, it's grimdark, and I took that the wrong way. Grim-dark. What does grimdark mean? Well, it comes from Warhammer 40k. Hope is zero in Warhammer. There is no such thing as hope. There is only war. There is only death and violence and cruelty and betrayal and war. So when I heard this book was grimdark, I said, oh. Well, I kind of like hope in my stories, so I mean, I don't know. I don't want to read something that's just like depressing. Like just pure depression, basically. Right? Like the fun part of grimdark, Warhammer 40k, is the fact that you get to paint your little figures and you get to move them around, and it's this huge, awesome setup when it all comes together. I've never played it, but it looks awesome, and I get it. But to facilitate the constant war between whichever faction the player brings to the table, you gotta have lore that justifies petty squabbles turning into massive conflicts over basically whatever you want. And so when I heard grimdark, I heard all of these booktubers saying grimdark, 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 grimdark. It's like the quintessential grimdark series, and I've only read the first book. I haven't read a single page. I just finished this book. I haven't read a single page of the second book or the third book or any of the standalones or any of the short stories or the sequel trilogy. I haven't read any of that, and I was kept at arm's length because at the end of the day, I enjoy hopeful themes in my stories, and grimdark is not hopeful, is at its core as a descriptor, not a genre. It's not a subgenre. It's a descriptor of a story, kind of antithetical to hope, to good vibes, to fun. Not fun. I mean, if you have fun watching like a man get beaten down into his like worst state and then either dying or just being left hollow, maybe you'll enjoy grimdark, right? If you read A Little Life, I hear that book's pretty bad, like pretty gruesome to its main character. If you enjoyed A Little Life, you might enjoy actual real grimdark. This is not grimdark. You say this book is grimdark, and you have to go say that Game of Thrones is grimdark. You have to go say that Malazan is grimdark. And at the end of the day, I think this book has hope in it. It's not as grim and dark as people say it is, because grimdark has a meaning. It has, I mean, okay, I'm not going to say define meaning, but obviously I'm wrong. I'm willing to admit that. I probably missed the drift from grimdark, Warhammer, Ollie's War, no hope, to grimdark as in this book can be like tagged as like, 18 plus for its graphic. Like if it was a film, it would be rated 18A because of its graphic violence. Oh. So, and okay, no spoilers, but there is a scene in this book that is very reminiscent of something out of like The Boys TV show. It involves a lot of blood going everywhere very rapidly, right? And I thought to myself, oh, no one's calling The Boys grimdark. Even though, like this book, it has a dry, black comedic tone, or like black comedic moments, like it's not grimdark, man. That's been building for a minute. I'm sorry you had to witness that, but that's been building for a minute. This isn't grimdark. This is like a Game of Thrones light almost, right? Game of Thrones is this sprawling cast of characters over like two continents and all the politics that go on in between. And you know what? I'll give it this. This book takes place over three continents. Except that's not the whole truth. It has scenes take place in the wilderness of two continents and one, I'd say, general, like, actual setting. Here, I'm just going to set my chair. And so you meet this character, Logan Ninefingers. He's smart and thoughtful, yet he is from the north. He is seen as a barbarian. And I found his character to be delightful. It was fun to read from his perspective, and there was this moment where you see him from other people's perspective, and that just made for a bit of comedy because we know as readers that he's smart and insightful into people and like different things. He's a complex person. I think that above all, what people got right about this book was characters. The characters are really good. Logan Ninefingers I liked. I really connected, oddly enough, with Luther, with Giselle Dunn Luther. He is an asshole, right? It's one of those things where in a grimdark story, he would probably, he'd probably be a lot worse, and it'd be a lot worse, right? Grimdark is hard to do as a novel format because it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's anti-hope. It's at its core, grimdark is anti-hope. It is anti-good. It is evil, 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 evil. That's all that, like, not evil as in moral, but it is morally bad. It's morally corrupt and but like Giselle is just an asshole. Logan is raised in a culture where murder is kind of normalized, just like kind of like our Vikings of history, right? It's bizarre to me. And Sandanglocta, he is the highlight for most people. I liked reading about Luther's story more than his. I mean, he is good, but I watched a few reviews to kind of, because I felt crazy, right? I had watched reviews, and not reviews, but like spoiler free, trying to get myself interested in these books in the past. And I have these memories of it, and I refresh my memory on the reviews, and people are saying this is the dark, this, and these are people who've read the whole series, and I'm sitting here as someone who's read the first book and going, you lied to me. At least with this book, you kind of lied to me. You said the Blade itself review, and then told me about how it pans out. Not how it, they didn't spoil anything, but like how it develops, and maybe I read the second and third book, and they are pretty anti-hope, where maybe for like the majority stretch of it, it's just bad thing, violence, cruelty, unwanted, like just everything that I was expecting in this book. Maybe I read it, maybe that happens. All right, so what was it? Sandanglocta. He's cool. Nothing else to say really. He's an interesting character. He is probably one of the most compelling characters. Like, beside myself, I think that most people liked him, and I get it. But personally, I was drawn towards Luther because I always enjoy a competently written asshole character, because a good asshole character will not just be an asshole, and he'll also still be an asshole. You know what I mean? He will have moments where he's not an asshole, but you'll not make him such a good guy that you forget that he's an asshole, right? And then Baez was cool. He really kind of flipped the wise wizard mentor, but it's different with him, right? He's not a flip of like, he's less Gandalf and more like one of Satan's disciples, basically, for lack of a better term. Like these he's the first of the trainees of the so-called, like, what I would say, the god of magic. Basically, he is the first of the trainees of the god of magic. You find this out pretty fast, and yeah, I might do spoilers, like light spoilers, not like actual like plot spoilers, because there is a plot to this book. People lie to you about that too, and I get why, but it's a personal thing. But Baez, he's fun. He's fun to read about. He has a temper. It's pretty long. Like his fuse is pretty long, but when it gets down, it gets down. And there's just something about, like, he's charismatic. I've heard in a review, and I agree with this, that his characters, Abercrombie's characters, are quirky rather than, like, I don't know. They're not real people. They're characters. They're good characters, but people are like, I know these characters like the back of my hand. I'm like, I can tell you've read the whole trilogy, because from this book, I've got a good outline of them. I have an outline of what happened to them in the past. I have so much knowledge that needs to be filled in that I can't say that I know these people like the back of my hand. You know, you can tell when people have read the whole trilogy and are really trying to just recommend it to you, but saying it's a review, because it's not a review of the first book. It's a recommendation video, and you're hiding it as such. But this book is good. I liked this book. I thought that it was reminiscent of Game of Thrones, like Song of Ice and Fire novel series, which is my first adult fantasy series, and what really got me into reading. And people, another complaint I've heard people have is like the plot, but the world building, right? That's the second complaint, is in this book, there is not a lot of world building. Which is kind of missing the forest for the trees. The fact that the world, how do I say this? The characters and the world are intertwined. You don't have you don't have Luther without the First Law world, right? You don't have Logan Nine Vigors without the First Law world. These characters tell us a lot about the world and just the technology level. Like, there's not, I wouldn't say a wealth to begin. Like, it's not like reading a book of Malazan where you come away with a whole new chapter of knowledge, right? But you can kind of extrapolate. At least I can. It was very easy to see, like, okay, so this is kind of like, oh, so it's like, yeah, it's like aristocracy, like, you know, medieval aristocracy. Okay. And then you hear about some of the colonization efforts, and I'm thinking, okay, so this is like less African colonization or like North American colonization or American colonization, and more Norman colonization, which, you know, cool, I guess. It was interesting to kind of like figure that out at the start of the book. I'd say I definitely like the first half of the book better than the second half, but I think I'm alone in that. I think I just like the slower pace, right? The less, I don't know, things just kind of came together a bit sloppily. Like, I'm sure it's going to be revealed that it was all this, you know, master plan by someone within the government or something. You know what I mean? Like, some like the god of magic is returning or something. I don't know. I'm sure it's going to be revealed something, you know what I mean, whoever Baez serves or whatever. But I just, the world is there and it's interesting, right? I think the best thing world building can do for you is leave you with questions, period, right? Like, period. I think that if a world leaves you with questions, fills your knowledge in enough to make you want to know what the answers are, it's done its job. Like, the world of Malazan is amazing, not only for what it offers you, but for what it doesn't, what it holds, what it lets you see, but not touch, not know about, right? And this world offers a lot of that. There's two, okay, two types of magic. I won't say systems because there's no system. There's two types of magic, and there's also, like, there was a god of spirits, a god of magic, a god of technology, or I guess craftsmanship, which is like technology. And these are all very interesting concepts, but we still have relics up from that time, which is just this interesting piece of world building that I don't think I've seen. Usually it's like ancient history. This is more like the gods were around in classical history. This is like us Romans versus usually it's us versus the ancient Egyptians, and then it's like the ancient fantasy races lived back when the pyramids were built, and like even the classical people were like, damn, those guys are old, right? Another thing is the plot. People, how do I say this, yes, there is a lot of time just spent with the characters. Like, there's a lot of time just following Glokta and illustrating the challenges he faces in his society as a disabled person. It's kind of, again, it's missing the forest for the trees, saying this has no plot. I hate, it gets, okay, I don't hate it. It gets under my skin when people say a book has no plot. Like, every book, even if it is just a string of character decisions, that's the plot. The plot of this book is character to character. For Giselle, for Luther, it is his fencing tournament. For Glokta, it is rooting out and like kind of consolidating power for the inquisitorial branch of the government, for the torturers branch of the government, for like the secret police basically. And then for Baez, I'll put Baez and Logan together. But for them, it is making their way through the hostile north, through the political climate there, and then making their way into the capital and trying to find and establish themselves and basically not get nabbed. There is a plot. It's just not the series plot. It is not the overarching plot that is made up of 3 books. It is a book's plot. This is a 500-page book. It has enough plot. It has enough character moments. It has enough. It's a very well-balanced book, in my opinion. It is a balanced book, right? There is plot, but it is character by character, right? Recently I read Shadow of What Was Lost, and that was a plot-heavy book where the characters are like light as a feather, and the plot is 3 bricks, right? And this is more of like kind of like that. Like it's close. The character is the plot. What? Why do people say that this has no plot? Like this. I feel crazy. I feel crazy because I'm watching some of my favorite reviewers just spew what I feel is misinformation about this book. I'm sitting here going, dude, this is the exact rhetoric. Like, not rhetoric. Okay. This is the exact narrative that pushed me away from reading this book. It genuinely pushed me away. And maybe it's light on, I guess, story progression to the end of the trilogy, but like it's the first book. It's the first book. So much happens in this book. Happens to the characters. We learn a lot about, obviously, anything that we know. Like, it just, it boggles my mind. You know who I actually did like until I still like him. I can't bring myself to hate him. Colin West. He is I'll say a war hero. He is considered a war hero among the aristocracy, or among basically the only few people who matter. So he is raised from his commoner status up to commander or some such position. Basically, he's pretty high up in the military structure, and he is described very early on as having a temper. And obviously, in my head, I'm like, okay, him and Giselle are going to have a confrontation at one point or another. I was wrong. I was wrong in the worst, best way I have ever been wrong about one of my favorite characters. Because not only is the scene, the most horrifying scene, I won't say horrifying, the most shocking scene and almost graphic scene for me. I won't say graphic, like graphic violence, but like the most shocking scene for me was the abuse he gave, like he doled out to his sister. It was shocking. I read, sometimes you got to get a few pages in here and there, and I read on the toilet, okay? And I was sitting there, and I was like, I put the book down. I was like, what the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? I went out. I finished up, washed my hands. I went out and I went, you're never gonna guess what happened, dude. Like, Mom, like, holy fuck. You're never gonna guess what just happened. Like, that, it shocked me to my core. The most gruesome scene, at least for me, was the visceral description he gave to a torture scene involving a finger and a cleaver, right? But to me, that wasn't shock. It was graphic because of the description and the detail used in the description, right? But it didn't shock me. It didn't make me reel as much as the abuse, the domestic violence scene did. And I think that's where the true power of his characters lie, is that, like, he perfectly Chekhov's gun this, and it makes so much sense, and I feel kind of stupid, right? West is such a perfectly, that's one of those things. West has a plot in this. His arc is his plot, and it is, at first he's just mostly helping out with Giselle, being a fencing partner, and then slowly he is made aware of the threat of the Northmen, and he has to start preparing himself and the nation to go and fight a war that he knows that they are very underprepared for in their mentality and their actual equipment. And it all comes to a boiling point when he lays hands on his sister, and it is such a masterfully executed arc plot. It is so well done. Whereas Giselle was probably my favorite character despite him being an asshole, I think that West is my favorite character despite me kind of hating his guts. Like, I think I just these, that moment of shock I hope will stick with me. I've just finished this book. And then you have Furrow, who is kind of a less important character in this book, and does kind of fall into the trap of feeling like set up and kind of laying the groundwork for future books. I'm assuming the second book, honestly, but maybe future books plural. Essentially, she is a vengeance-hungry killer that is recruited by a magi, a mage, and brought to the main capital, the main place this book takes place in, and that's it. She's in literally the second to last chapter. She gets some interesting development with the way she treats Logan, but besides that, she was very kind of like, you could tell that he was just setting her up for later, hopefully, greatness. But that brings me to the next and last character that I'm going to cover. It was Dogman, and I guess the band formerly known as Logan's Crew. But Logan's Crew was fun, but people were like, I saw reviews that were like, I fell in love with them, and I'm like, I mean, cool, but they're kind of assholes. Like, I guess the one thing that bothered me until the scene between West and Glocta was that there's no friendships. People always say this is gritty realism. It's not realistic. People don't behave this way, and I don't believe they behaved this way back then. I believe that there was friendships and basic common decency to a certain level. Like, I can buy that Giselle is probably fake with all his friends, and a lot of his friends are probably fake with him because he lives in a world where personal reputation is everything, and you can't be trusting too many people, basically, right? But to have no one, I mean, I guess I can buy it to a certain extent, right? But for no one to have anyone, I can get it. I get it for Logan. He's special circumstances, but even with his crew, even though he could trust them with his life, he couldn't trust them with, like, you know what I mean? Like, it didn't feel like you can go to them and, like, they didn't feel like friends, right? There wasn't any friendship beyond emotional. I'll say it, emotional friendship. You got to have someone who you can at least kind of, like, lean on for support. It felt like if you were to lean on, I don't know, maybe this is a dumb criticism, but it did kind of bother me, where people say this is realistic, and it's like, no, this is not. That's like saying, well, why aren't the women put in a domestic role when that was how it historically was? And it's like, well, this is, first of all, this is a fantasy world. This is a secondary world. The rules are completely different. And I guess I have to kind of not dash away my criticism, but I guess I have to swallow my own, like, I get it. Maybe in this world, there really is no good to be found in having a friend, right? Maybe it is grimdark, and I'm just not there in the series. But, like, I don't know. It just, this book was so missold to me, and I feel like it sucks because I liked it a lot. You know what? I was in a bad reading spot. I just finished Orb Scepter Throne, but I pushed myself to finish it, which I probably shouldn't have done. And I was kind of burnt out, and it took the Blade itself kind of, like, I look at my shelves and I'm like, I can't wait to read that. I can't wait to read that. I can't wait to have read that. And then when it comes time to pick it up, sometimes I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to read anything from here. And so it took a kind of a third party, right? Someone who I wasn't anticipating to come in and to break me out of that funk. And it just hit me right place, right time. I'm just disappointed that I didn't have the right expectations going into it. And I think that might have helped me enjoy the book more, because I was kind of enjoying the time while the basically the good times lasted. I was expecting it to just, like, the rug to be pulled out from under me, and for, like, a bunch of characters to die, and for the hope to just drain out, and it never happened. And so even when it got violent, like, I think up until the second last chapter, overall, I'd say like, I'm trying to decide which one. I'd say Homeland by R.A. Salvatore, a Dritz novel, was more violent in its descriptions of death than this book was. Now that changed, right? But it was like, this isn't dark by violence. This isn't particularly dark by, like, cruelty standards either, right? Like, the torturing scenes were we got one proper torture scene. We got another we got an antagonism scene, we got an implied torture scene, but we only got one genuine torture scene. And it was kind of, it was made me squirm, right? I'm not saying he did a bad job. I'm saying he did a bang up job. I'm just saying that people oversold it. I can't recommend this book enough. Genuinely, if you like, I'd say, I'd say, gray fantasy, right? If you like characters that aren't goody two shoes who, "Oh, I can only hope for the best, sir." You know what I mean? If you like Game of Thrones, this is pretty good. It's not like exactly like Game of Thrones, but it's on the same wavelength, tone and kind of like temperament wise. I'd say it's got the same political feeling and the same level of kind of like violence, except there is a little more like heroic bend to it. Like the main characters get into scuffles that not I would okay, not realistically. I would say more that in Song of Ice and Fire would definitely end a bit differently if they got into those type of scuffles. But you know what? Overall, I really did like this book. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this not overly long, but like it's a long video. I had a rant. Thank you. Bye 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 bye. I got another monitor, so I have to look over there now. Bye bye bye.